Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we've got one of the most, rigorous source stacks I think we've ever looked at. It's a personal weekly review for 2025 week 32.
Yeah, it's incredibly detailed.
It's not just, a quick checklist. This is like a surgical assessment of progress towards some really ambitious goals.
Yeah.
Fitness, coding, open source stuff.
It really is. And I think our mission here really is to explore that inherent tension you always find, right? Between setting these, let's say, aggressive goals, like an active, healthy, minimalist life, and then the unavoidable reality of setbacks, like getting sick, which happened here. We're basically using this learner's own data to see how resilience and adaptation actually work.
That's a great way to put it. And the scope, it's huge. Health, meditation, cooking, coding, hobbies. I mean, they set a really high bar.
Definitely.
Okay, so let's jump right into section 1. Because the health metrics, they got thrown off almost immediately. The body just kind of rebelled.
Right. It's the classic example, isn't it? Biology just disrupting the best laid plans. The goal is all about empowerment, improving quality of life.
But that foundation just, cracked under the pressure of illness right away.
Exactly. Let's start with sleep. The goal was a clean 7 hours daily.
And the actual number, quite a bit lower.
Yeah.
Average 6.20 hours per night. The source says it was insufficient, inconsistent.
Yeah, and it points directly to inflammation and fever messing things up. That led to really fragmented sleep, especially over the weekend, apparently.
And those post-dinner naps, right?
Yeah.
I know those can really derail the whole sleep cycle.
Oh, absolutely. And, that lack of good rest immediately impacts activity levels. The walking goal was 5,600 steps a day.
Which sounds reasonable usually.
But the average came in way under at 4,606 in action. And the reason's clear in the notes. Basically bedridden a lot of the time because of the fever.
Okay, but here's where it gets interesting, the adaptation. I see they made a conscious choice.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of forcing themselves to hit that step count, which probably would have made things worse.
Right.
They chose to simply just rest. And they framed it kind of cleverly, I think, not as failure, but as productive time for contemplation, thinking about upcoming plans on ongoing projects.
That shows real maturity in how they're approaching this. They realized the goal wasn't just the number, the 5,600 steps, it was quality of life.
And sometimes rest is the most productive thing.
Exactly, respecting the body's limits. And this adaptive mindset, it carries over into diet and weight too, which the data there is a bit surprising.
Yeah, get this. They were trying intermittent fasting, the 16.8 window, but still transitioning, so basically eating when hungry.
Which you'd think, with low activity, might lead to weight gain.
Right. But the average weight stayed stable, around 67.09 kilograms. But, and here's the weird part, they actually saw a net decrease over the week, about 1.45 kilograms down.
That seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? Lower activity, but weight loss.
Totally. The author thinks it was probably the sleep disruption, plus, water weight fluctuation.
Yeah.
You mentioned that typical range, 0.5 to 2.2 kilograms.
Okay, so maybe the stability or even the slight drop wasn't about activity, but more about controlling what they ate.
Precisely. The input control was tight, mostly self-cooked meals, only one meal out.
Yeah.
And they tracked the diet ratio, that plants, protein, carbs thing.
So 2.1.1 or 1.2.1 ratio.
Yeah,
right?
aiming for mostly plants and protein. And they even want to refine it more, like 2.2.1 or 2.1.1, doubling down on plants and protein.
So this real micromanagement of the diet, the input, it's actually a nice bridge to how they manage their mental state and lower intensity habits in section 2. Because when your physical energy tanks, where do you put your focus?
Right, exactly. And the answer seems to be consistent low-intensity mental stuff, like meditation.
Mm-hmm. Even feeling poorly, they kept up the regularity. Maybe not long sessions, but they showed up.
Yeah. Sitting meditation, just for like a minute sometimes. And walking meditation, maybe 1 to 5 minutes, woven into chores like raking leaves.
It really shows the power of just doing something, even if it's tiny. That 1-minute habit keeps the whole system from collapsing,
Even though they admit they skipped some days, right? When they were really sick and just crashed after dinner.
Which is also important, acknowledging the breaks. But the core habit didn't completely vanish. And then there's the mental noting.
This part's fascinating. Despite feeling slightly feverish, they wrote they felt stoic as usual and feeling rather inspirational.
Wow. To feel inspirational when you're physically down, that suggests the mental practice is really, really working. That quiet contemplation time wasn't wasted.
It became fuel.
Yeah. And you see that same sense of control in their cooking approach. The goal wasn't just eating, it was taking control of consumption, learning skills.
Like practicing that miso soup recipe with Veggies, prawns, tofu, beans, noodles. Sounds pretty good, actually.
It does.
Hmm.
And learning different ways to cook eggs, mostly hard-boiled, sometimes steamed. It's all about mastering fundamentals.
That focus on control and maybe simplicity flows into the decluttering goal, too. Aiming for that minimalist lifestyle.
But realistically, progress was slow because energy was low.
Right. They note nothing much achieved, but still consistent in small ways. Clearing one item, heading to the kitchen, handling receipts, little things.
And crucially, they track what didn't get done, like the curtains or sorting a drawer. That honesty keeps the whole review process grounded, doesn't it? It avoids just, painting a rosy picture.
Absolutely. Okay, let's switch gears now completely. Section 3, project progress. This is where coding comes in, and well, a really unexpected breakthrough happened.
Yeah, these project goals, they tell us a lot about creative workflow, especially what happens when your tools or maybe your access to them suddenly changes.
So the coding goals were about building stuff, learning, but also contributing back to open source, right? File OS.
Free Libre open source software, yeah. Specifically in what they call GPR languages.
Which is their shorthand for Go, Python, Elixir, Erlang, or Rust. Modern stuff.
Right. And they mentioned starting to pick up PR contributions. Again, those are pull requests. Code changes, mostly fixing small things like typos in different projects.
Kind of like digital housekeeping. Important, but maybe not glamorous.
Exactly. But then here comes the constraint that changes the game. The source notes mention the AI craze settling down.
Oh, yes.
And as part of that, a lot of companies reduced their free tier API usage, which meant basically the authors suddenly had much less access to free AI coding assistance.
Okay, so you'd think that's a major setback, right? Losing a powerful tool.
You would. But here's the twist. The author describes this reduction in AI help as leading to a rather refreshing experience.
Refreshing? How so?
They explicitly say they rediscovered the joy of programming, of incremental building stuff up slowly but surely.
Wow. So the limitation, the constraint, actually led to a better feeling about the work.
Isn't that something? It forced them back to basics, perhaps. And that resulted in deeper engagement, more enjoyment. They still did the maintenance work, fixing tests, improving coverage, but also added a new feature, an animated heat map.
So focusing on fundamentals actually generated maybe more meaningful progress in a way.
It seems like it. And that renewed energy seems to have spilled over into writing and documentation, too.
Yeah, 2 posts published per day, reading old posts, and starting that big project, uploading video reflections on years of fish keeping. That sounds like a long-term commitment.
It definitely does. And that sort of long-term contemplative focus, you see it again in the gardening notes.
Ah, right. The line set there was described as being about patience, observation, and respect for nature's timeline, taking it slow.
Germination rates were mixed, but the emphasis was on the process, not just immediate results.
And workspace stuff. Some cleaned up on one balcony, but the grouting on the other one. Still waiting.
Honesty again. But the big reflection point seems to be that yellow-blue rack dilemma.
Yes. This ties back perfectly to the forced rest earlier in the week, doesn't it?
It really does.
Mhm.
They're seriously thinking about converting this rack, which was for fish keeping, into a seedling rack for gardening.
But it depends on the cost of installing LED lights.
Right. But the key thing is that productive contemplation time from when they were sick, it's now showing up as concrete, long-term planning, thinking about infrastructure changes.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up, this deep dive into week 32. What does it really show us?
Well, I think it's a really powerful example of personal accountability in action, how detailed tracking lets you make very specific strategic adjustments when things go wrong, like getting sick.
Yeah, the trade-off was conscious.
Yeah.
Rest instead of steps. Contemplation instead of maybe intense coding sprints. And channeling that saved energy back into the core joy of the projects.
And the key takeaway, I think, especially for you listening, is that sometimes pulling back is the best way forward. That external constraint, like the reduced AI access,
Yeah.
it forced a return to fundamentals, which paradoxically led to more engagement, more enjoyment. Sometimes limitations can be, well, liberating in a weird way.
That really leaves us with a provocative thought, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Based just on the source material.
Go on.
If illness, or any setback really, forces you to slow down, does that shift from the active, maybe short-term metrics like hitting daily push-ups or steps to more passive, long-term thinking like planning that seedling rack conversion? Could that actually lead to more creative, sustainable progress in the long run? compared to just rigidly sticking to the original plan?
That's a fascinating question. Does the forced pause actually unlock a different, maybe more strategic kind of productivity?
Something to definitely ponder as
Yeah.
you look at your own plans for the week ahead.